Who's coming to help you now, specialist? Your congressman? Some committee on equal opportunity? The words, laced with the casual cruelty of unchallenged authority, echoed across the shimmering heat of the training range. The assembled platoon of infantry hopefuls shuffled their feet in the dust, a nervous titter running through their ranks like a current. Sergeant Major Elias Thorne, a man carved from granite and indignation, stood over the small, unassuming figure of Specialist Anya Sharma. He saw only a box ticker, a diversity quota in human form, someone who didn't fit his rigid, archaic mold of what a warrior should be. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture was perfect, but to him, it was all a fragile facade. He saw weakness where there was quiet discipline. He saw hesitation where there was calm observation. With a theatrical flourish of disgust, he hooked a thick finger under the fabric of her uniform, just above her breast pocket, and tore her marksmanship badge clean off. The sharp rip of Velcro was louder than a gunshot in the tense silence that followed. The badge, a symbol of proven skill, fluttered to the ochre-colored dirt like a fallen leaf. The laughter died. The crowd, now complicit, simply stared. But Anya Sharma did not react. She did not flinch, she did not glare, she did not even blink. Her gaze remained fixed on the distant targets, her breathing steady, her hands resting calmly at her sides. Her silence was a vacuum, pulling all the air and noise and arrogance out of the moment, leaving only the sergeant major's pathetic display of dominance exposed. Far away, in the cool, air-conditioned observation tower, Colonel Davies leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, not at Thorne, but at the specialist. He'd seen that stance before, that profound stillness in the heart of a storm, in places where lesser men broke. He saw the way her weight was perfectly balanced, the way her eyes scanned the terrain not as a picture, but as a problem to be solved. He saw a ghost from his past, a quiet professional cloaked in the drab fatigues of a regular soldier. But when the general saw her stance, he saw not a victim, but a weapon, patiently waiting for a target. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to raise its voice, type competence below. The air on Range 17 was a physical thing, thick with the smell of sun-baked creosote, cordite, and the simmering resentment of men pushed to their limits. Sergeant Major Thorne paced before his captive audience like a caged bear, his shadow a long, menacing slash in the late morning sun. He thrived on this atmosphere. It was his forge, and he was the hammer, believing he could pound any piece of raw human material into the shape of a soldier. His philosophy was simple, brutal, and loud. Strength was dominance, skill was aggression, and respect was a one-way street flowing directly to him. Anya Sharma, standing at parade, rest amidst the other, larger soldiers, was an affront to this philosophy. She was an anomaly he couldn't process, a variable that disrupted his simple equation of what made a warrior. Her presence in this advanced infantry course was, to him, a symptom of a sickness, a weakening of the institution he had dedicated his life to. He had reviewed her file, of course. It was sparse, almost suspiciously so. Good scores, clean record, a transfer from a support battalion that was listed only by numerical designation. To Thorne, this lack of a storied, grunt-approved lineage was proof of her inadequacy. She was a paper pusher, a REMF who had somehow talked her way into his world, and he was determined to make an example of her. His monologue was a well-rehearsed performance, a tirade he had delivered countless times to break down new recruits. He spoke of the crucible of combat, of the bond forged in shared misery, of the absolute necessity of unquestioning brute force aggression. Out there, he boomed, his voice a gravelly roar that carried without need for amplification. There are no safe spaces. There are no trigger warnings. There is only the enemy, and your job is to run through him, to break him, to overwhelm him with such violence and fury that his soul leaves his body before the bullet does. He stopped directly in front of Sharma. He was a full foot taller, his frame casting her in complete shadow. And what will you do, specialist? Will you file a report? Will you analyze the socioeconomic factors driving his aggression? The men around her, caught between fear of Thorn and a pack animal instinct to side with the strong, offered a few weak chuckles. You carry that rifle like it's a textbook. You stand on my range like you're waiting for a bus. You wear that badge. He gestured to the spot on the ground where it lay, like you earned it in a video game. I've seen your kind before. You think war is a science. You think it's about angles and calculations. You're wrong. War is a beast. It's a bloody, screaming, visceral thing, and it will chew up and spit out anyone who tries to think their way through it. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. You don't belong here. You are a liability. You are a weak link in a chain that cannot afford to have one. Every man on this line is now less safe because you're standing on it. That is a fact. Sharma's face remained a placid mask. Her heart rate, had he been able to measure it, was as steady as a metronome. She was processing his words not as insults, but as data points. She was analyzing his posture, his tactics of intimidation, the psychological effect he was having on the unit. She was observing, learning, calculating. Her silence was not submission. It was intelligence gathering. To Thorn, however, it was confirmation of his every prejudice. It was the vacant stare of someone in over their head, the frozen paralysis of fear. He saw what he wanted to see, a narrative that confirmed his own superiority. He stepped back, satisfied with his work. The seed of doubt had been planted. The unit's cohesion was now fractured by his targeted attack. He had isolated her, marked her as an outsider. In his mind, he had done his duty. He had exposed the weakness. He was a guardian of the old ways, a bulwark against the changing tides he so despised. The sun beat down. The metal of the rifles grew hot to the touch, and the specialist marksmanship badge lay in the dirt, a small, forgotten testament to a skill he had dismissed without ever witnessing. He had made his pronouncement, delivered his judgment, and in his profound arrogance, he had no idea that he had just publicly humiliated the most dangerous person on the entire military installation, a woman whose true file was locked in a vault 3 levels of security above his own pay grade. His assumptions were the bars of his own cage, and he was about to watch, in stunned disbelief, as she calmly walked right through them. The day's primary exercise was called Operation Chimera, a name Thorn himself had chosen for its implication of a multi-headed, unpredictable threat. It was his masterpiece of psychological warfare, a simulated hostage rescue in a sprawling, multi-level concrete structure known affectionately as the Kill House. The scenario was designed to be unwinnable. It was a pressure cooker, a test of pure, unthinking aggression and rapid, violent entry. Thorn's briefing was a testament to his philosophy. The intel is garbage, he barked, pointing a thick finger at a schematic on the screen. Assume hostiles in every room, IEDs on every door. The clock is ticking. You have 3 minutes from breach to secure the primary hostage, or the whole building goes up. Speed, violence of action, that's all that matters. Don't think. React. Go, go, go. He had deliberately assigned Specialist Sharma to the least glorious role imaginable, rear security. Her job was to watch the back door, a position so far removed from the action that it was essentially a timeout. Just try not to get lost, Specialist. He'd sneered over the comms during the team assignments, a final twist of the knife. The breach team, a stack of 6 large, amped-up soldiers led by a promising young sergeant, hit the front door with explosive force. They were the embodiment of Thorn's teaching, a symphony of shouting, controlled explosions, and overwhelming firepower. They moved fast, they were loud, and they were completely, utterly predictable. The first 2 rooms were cleared with brutal efficiency. Then, the scenario's true nature revealed itself. A simulated pressure plate IED, placed not on a door, but in the middle of a cleared hallway, electronically neutralized the first 2 men. A hidden sniper, firing paint round from a concealed position Thorn had cleverly designed, took out the third. The team's momentum shattered. Confusion replaced aggression. Their rapid assault devolved into a panicked, static firefight against unseen enemies. Over the comms, their voices grew frantic. Man down. Man down. We're pinned. Can't see the shooter. Thorn, watching from the control room with a grim sense of satisfaction, nodded. This was the lesson. Chaos is the natural state of combat. Now he would see who had the guts to push through. But they didn't. They were trapped by the script he had written for them. They followed their training to the letter, a training that emphasized a head-on charge, leaving them with no alternative when that charge was halted. The team leader was the next to go, hit by a burst of fire from a pop-up target as he tried to rally his men. Within 90 seconds, the entire breach team was declared combat ineffective. The comms fell into a dreadful silence, broken only by the static hiss and the simulated beeping of a bomb countdown timer that had just been activated. The exercise was a failure. The hostage was lost. The team was wiped out. Thorne allowed himself a small, bitter smile. The lesson was learned, or so he thought. From her position at the rear of the building, Anya Sharma had listened to the entire disaster unfold. She had not just heard the comms. She had listened to the cadence of the fire, the direction of the shouting, the length of the pauses. She had built a three-dimensional map of the engagement in her mind. While the breach team had seen a wall, she had seen a series of angles. While they saw a hallway, she saw a fatal funnel. Her comm clicked once. Command, this is rear security. Breach team is down. Requesting permission to continue the mission, solo, there was a moment of stunned silence in the control room. One of the evaluators looked at Thorne, who scoffed, grabbing the microphone. Negative, specialist. The exercise is over. Stand down, another single click. The timer is still active. I have a solution. Going dark, and with that her comms went dead. Thorne's face purpled with rage. What the hell does she think she's doing? Cut her feed. I want her off my range. But before the technician could comply, Colonel Davies' calm, authoritative voice cut through the room from the speaker in the corner. No, leave it on. Let's see her solution. On the screen, Sharma's camera feed, which had been a static image of a concrete wall and a metal door, suddenly came alive. But it wasn't with a frantic rush. It was with a display of such profound, methodical calm that it seemed to slow down time itself. The demonstration was about to begin, not with a bang, but with the quiet, deliberate click of a single piece of equipment being put into place, a sound that signaled the arrival of a level of professionalism so far beyond Thorne's comprehension that it might as well have been magic. The screen in the control room became a silent theater of impossible geometry and lethal grace. Anya Sharma moved not like a soldier, but like a force of nature, an inexorable tide of competence. She didn't approach the rear door. She dissected it with her eyes. She ran a gloved hand along the frame, not searching for a handle, but for imperfections in the metal, for the telltale signs of wiring, for the subtle pressure changes that would indicate a trap. Instead of a breaching charge, she pulled a small, specialized tool from her kit, a pneumatic pin puller. With a barely audible hiss, she silently extracted the hinge pins from the door. The heavy metal slab, now disconnected from its frame, was no longer an obstacle. It was a tool. With a controlled, fluid motion, she leaned the entire door inward, creating a narrow, unconventional entry point that bypassed the trigger mechanism for the simulated IED Thorne had so proudly placed there. She didn't enter. She paused, a statue in the gloom, her rifle at a low ready. She held a small, fiber-optic scope, no bigger than a pencil, and fed it through the gap. For a full 10 seconds, the only movement on screen was the slow, deliberate sweep of that scope. She was mapping the room, marking targets, noting cover, calculating ricochet angles. She was not reacting to the environment. She was dominating it with pure information. Then she moved. The first shot was not a target. It was fired from a hallway, through the gap, at a precise point on the far concrete wall. The paint round ricocheted exactly as she had calculated, striking the hidden sniper in the side of his helmet. The paint splattered hostile. A seasoned instructor who had been expecting a frontal assault was so shocked he forgot to even signal he was hit for a full second. Sharma flowed into the room, a wraith of tan and green. 2 more pop-up targets appeared. She didn't engage them directly. Her second shot hit a metal fire extinguisher on the wall, the impact spinning it around, and spraying a cloud of white powder that momentarily obscured the target's sensors, buying her a precious second. In that second, she was already moving, flanking them, and two sharp, distinct paps from her suppressed training rifle neutralized them both. She was a ghost. She made almost no sound. Her movements were an economy of force. Each step, each turn, each breath perfectly calibrated for maximum effect with minimum exposure. She reached the central chamber where the primary hostage, a training dummy, was seated in a chair, surrounded by a complex web of simulated laser tripwires connected to the bomb. The breach team was meant to charge through this, hoping to grab the hostage and get out before the lasers were tripped. Sharma stopped at the threshold. She didn't try to cross the floor. Instead, she looked up. On her screen, the operators in the control room saw her gaze track along a series of overhead pipes and electrical conduits. Without hesitation, she holstered her rifle, took a short, powerful step, and leaped, catching one of the pipes. She began to traverse the room from above, hand over hand, her body a pendulum of controlled strength, moving silently above the deadly web below. It was a move of breathtaking audacity and athleticism, a solution so far outside the doctrinal box that no one had even considered it possible. She reached the point directly above the hostage, lowered herself down, unhooked the dummy from its chair, and then, with the dummy secured to her back, traversed back the way she came. She never touched the floor. She never broke a beam. The bomb timer on the screen continued its silent, harmless countdown. In the control room, there was absolute, stunned silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the servers. Sergeant Major Thorne stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his face a mask of disbelief. The swagger, the arrogance, the unshakable certainty, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, confused man. He was watching a level of skill he didn't know existed. It wasn't the loud, brutal ballet of violence he preached. It was quiet. It was cerebral. It was precise. It was the work of an artist, not a blunt instrument. On the screen, Sharma dropped silently to the floor in the clear hallway, placed the hostage dummy gently against the wall, and brought her rifle back to the ready. Her camera panned across the now-secured objective. Her comm clicked on, her voice as calm and steady as it was at the beginning, utterly devoid of triumph or emotion. "Command, this is Sharma. Hostage is secure. Objective cleared." Standing by for instructions, the silence in the control room stretched for an uncomfortably long time. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting, of a man's entire worldview being systematically dismantled in under 3 minutes by a 5'5" specialist he had dismissed as a liability. The spell was broken by the sound of a heavy door opening at the back of the control room. Colonel Davies stepped inside, his face unreadable, but his eyes burning with an intensity that commanded immediate attention. He didn't look at the screens. He didn't look at the junior officers who now stood rigidly at attention. His gaze fell solely on Sergeant Major Thorne, who seemed to shrink under the weight of it. The colonel walked past the banks of monitors, his boots making no sound on the tiled floor, and stopped beside Thorne's chair. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet authority he projected was more powerful than any parade ground roar. "Give me your file," he said, his voice a low rumble. The real one, a young lieutenant, flustered, fumbled with a secure tablet. "Sir, her file is right here. Specialist Anya Sharma, 74th Support Battalion. That's her cover file, Lieutenant," Davies interrupted, his voice cutting like glass. "I need her operational record. It will require my credentials. 2-factor authentication. Top secret ///SCI clearance." The lieutenant's eyes widened. He quickly tapped in the colonel's codes, his hands trembling slightly. The screen flickered, and a new file appeared, this one with headers and warnings in stark red digital ink. The room held its collective breath. Colonel Davies took the tablet and held it up so Thorne could see. He didn't have to read the whole thing. The headers alone were enough to shatter any lingering remnants of the sergeant major's arrogance. The litany of qualifications and classifications scrolled past, a testament to a career spent in the darkest corners of the world. Unit designation, 7th Special Projects Division. Status, Tier 1 Operator. Primary specialties, hostage rescue, special reconnaissance, direct action. Skill qualifications, Master Breacher, Halo/Haho Jumpmaster, Combat Diver, Advanced Signal Intercept, fluent in 4 languages including Farsi and Russian. Combat déploiement, classified. 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 Each entry was a hammer blow to Thorne's ego. Each line item was a direct, irrefutable contradiction to every insult he had hurled. He had called her a paper pusher. She had more logged combat hours in denied areas than his entire platoon combined. He had mocked her marksmanship. She was a distinguished graduate of the most advanced sniper course in the military, a program so difficult that most candidates washed out in the first week. He had called her a liability. She was the person they sent in when generals and ambassadors got captured, the final desperate option when all else had failed. Colonel Davies scrolled down to a final entry, an instructor's note from her selection course. He read it aloud, his voice clear and resonant in the silent room. Operator Sharma is a force of quiet lethality. She possesses a tactical intellect that borders on precognitive. She does not solve problems, she unmakes them. Her greatest weapon is not her rifle, but the profound underestimation of her opponents. Recommend for immediate assignment to the most demanding and sensitive operations. Davies put the tablet down. He walked over to the main console and picked up the microphone for the range-wide PA system. He keyed it, and his voice boomed across the entire training complex, calm, clear, and final. Specialist Sharma, a moment of static, then her voice as placid as ever. Sir, that was the finest display of single-operator skill I have witnessed in my 30 years of service, Davies stated, each word a cannonade. Your solution was unorthodox, efficient, and perfectly executed. Well done. He paused, letting the praise hang in the air for all to hear. Then, he turned his head slightly, his eyes locking on Thorne. Sergeant Major Thorne, report to the base of the observation tower. Now, he put the microphone down and turned to face Thorne directly. The sergeant major stood up, his face pale, his body rigid. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost and realized it was his own career. As Thorne began his walk of shame out of the control room, Davies picked up one more thing from the console. It was the small cloth marksmanship badge that an evaluator had picked up from the dirt and brought inside. He held it in his palm, its simple design, a rifle wreathed in laurels, suddenly imbued with an almost mythical significance. He would return it to its rightful owner, not as a superior officer bestowing a favor, but as a sign of profound, earned respect from one professional to another. The story of what happened on Range 17 didn't just spread, it detonated. It moved through the barracks, the mess halls, and the command posts with the speed of a digital rumor, but with the weight of verified fact. It was too public, too spectacular to be denied. Every soldier who had been on that range, who had witnessed the public humiliation and the subsequent silent vindication, became a storyteller. The tale was told in hushed, reverent tones. They spoke of the way she moved, like a shadow with a purpose. They described the impossible shot, the ricochet that defied physics. They recounted her ascent over the laser grid, a feat of athleticism that already sounded like a legend. The details grew with each telling, but the core truth remained immutable. They had all been wrong. They had judged a book by its unassuming cover and found it to be a master text on modern warfare. The focus of the story, inevitably, turned to Sergeant Major Thorne. He became a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of the dangers of assumption. Men who had once feared him now looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. His authority, built on a foundation of bluster and intimidation, had crumbled to dust. He was no longer the bear. He was the man who had tried to poke the bear and discovered it was a dragon in disguise. Thorne, for his part, did not rage. He did not make excuses. The shock of the event seemed to have fundamentally rewired him. He reported to Colonel Davies' office as ordered, stood at attention, and accepted the formal reprimand that was entered into his permanent record. It was a career-ending mark, and he knew it. But the colonel's quiet, disappointed words cut deeper than any official punishment. Your prejudice blinded you, Sergeant Major, Davies had said, his voice laced with a weary sadness. You saw a woman, so you assumed weakness. You saw a quiet demeanor, so you assumed incompetence. You have spent your career training men to fight the enemy in front of them. You forgot the most dangerous enemy is the one within you. Your own ego. Thorne retreated into himself. He spent his days in his office, the door closed, replaying the footage from the kill house over and over. He wasn't looking for flaws. He was studying it. He was trying to understand. He was deconstructing his own failed philosophy by watching its perfect refutation on a loop. A week later, he saw Specialist Sharma walking across the parade ground. She was alone, on her way to the transport depot, her assignment here apparently complete. Thorne hesitated for a long moment, then did something that shocked everyone who saw it. He walked out to meet her. He didn't order her to stop. He simply stood in her path, forcing her to acknowledge him. She stopped, her expression as neutral as ever. Thorne was not the same man he was a week ago. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a heavy, humbled stillness. He didn't apologize, not in words. He knew that words were cheap, his own especially. Instead, he looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time, seeing the operator beneath the uniform. The ricochet, he said, his voice raspy and used. Off the concrete. The angle. How did you know the spalling wouldn't alter the trajectory? It was a question from a student to a master. It was the ultimate admission of her superiority. Anya Sharma looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't pity or triumph. It was the simple, direct focus of teacher. I checked the aggregate composition of the concrete when we first entered the range, she said, her voice calm and technical. This facility uses a high-side limestone mix. It's predictable. Spalls at less than 5 degrees with 556 millimeters rounds at that distance. You just have to know what you're looking at, she paused. You see a wall, Sergeant Major. I see a tool with that. She gave him a slight, professional nod, stepped around him, and continued on her way, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the vast parade ground, a man a little wiser, a lot more humble, and forever changed by the quietest person he had ever met. The legend of that day was cemented into the institutional culture. The kill house was still used, but the final impossible scenario was now officially named the Sharma Solution. New recruits were shown the footage, not just of her flawless run, but of Thorne's initial arrogant speech. It became the ultimate lesson in humility, a powerful reminder that looks can be deceiving, and that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you notice the least. The physical badge Thorne had ripped from her uniform became an artifact. Colonel Davies had it framed, and it hung on the wall of the main briefing room, right next to the portraits of decorated generals. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "Competence is a virtue that needs no praise." The story resonated far beyond the confines of the base. It became an anonymous legend whispered among the special operations community, a piece of folklore passed from one generation of quiet professionals to the next. It was a story about more than just a failed exercise. It was about a fundamental truth of their world. It was a validation of their entire ethos, the belief that action is superior to words, that skill is more valuable than swagger, and that true respect is a silent currency exchanged only between those who have truly been tested. For Sergeant Major Thorne, the event was not the end of his career, but the beginning of a new one. The formal reprimand blocked any further promotion, but Colonel Davies, seeing the profound change in the man, pulled some strings to keep him on as the head instructor for the training range. Thorne was a different kind of teacher now. He was harder, in a way, but also fairer. He no longer preached the gospel of blind aggression. He spoke of angles, of strategy, of using the environment, of the importance of thinking before shooting. He taught his soldiers to see the wall not as an obstacle, but as a tool. His favorite teaching aid was the story of his own greatest failure. He would stand before each new class of recruits, a humble man, and tell them about the quiet specialist who had dismantled his entire world without raising her voice. "I learned more about being a soldier in those 3 minutes," he would say, his voice thick with the memory, "than I had in the 20 years before. I looked at her, and I saw everything I thought was weak. And I was wrong. I was dangerously, profoundly wrong. Never, ever make that mistake. The person you underestimate will be the one who gets you killed. His story became a rite of passage, a lesson seared into the minds of hundreds of young soldiers. He had transformed his personal shame into a powerful institutional lesson, ensuring that the legacy of Anya Sharma's quiet competence would be passed on. Anya, herself, was a ghost. She had disappeared back into the classified world from which she had emerged, her brief, impactful appearance on this regular army base already feeling like a dream. No one knew her real name, her real unit, or where she went. She was an enigma, a living symbol of the silent warrior who walks among them, unseen and unheard, until the moment they are needed. Her legacy was not in a plaque or a named exercise, but in the subtle shift in culture she had inspired. It was in the young female soldier who had watched the whole thing unfold and now carried herself with a new, quiet confidence. It was in the NCOs who started valuing precision over volume of fire. It was in a sergeant major who had learned that the loudest voice in the room is often the most ignorant. Her impact was a testament to the idea that one person, through a single, undeniable demonstration of excellence, can change everything. They can remind an entire institution of its core values, not by giving a speech, but by simply doing the work by being the standard. She had proven, in the most dramatic way possible, that true strength doesn't need to be announced. It simply is, and in the face of it, all the noise and arrogance of the world must eventually fall silent, humbled and in awe. 6 months later, the dust on Range 17 had settled, but the echoes of that day remained. Sergeant Major Thorne stood watching a new platoon run through the Sharma solution. They were faster, smarter, and more cohesive than any group he had trained before. They communicated in clipped, precise sentences. They moved with a fluid understanding of angles and cover. They were trying to solve the problem, not just crash through it. One of the teams, led by a sharp young corporal who had been a private on the day of the incident, actually managed to secure the hostage, bypassing the laser grid using a complex system of ropes and carabiners they had devised themselves. It was a clumsy imitation of Sharma's effortless grace, but it was creative. It was thoughtful. It was an evolution. Thorne allowed a rare, small smile. He was no longer building battering rams. He was forging scalpels. After the exercise, the young corporal approached him, her face flushed with pride. "We did it, Sergeant Major. We beat the Sharma solution." Thorne shook his head. "No, Corporal. You didn't beat it. You understood it. There's a difference." He walked with her towards the main observation tower, its shadow stretching long in the afternoon sun. On the wall inside, the framed badge still hung. Several of the new privates were gathered around it, reading the plaque. Thorne stopped beside them. "You know," he said to the group, his voice quiet and reflective, "I'm the one who ripped that badge off her uniform." The privates looked at him, their eyes wide with shock. They had only heard the legend. They didn't know he was a central character. "I stood right where you are," Thorne continued, "and I told her she didn't belong here. I told her she was weak. I let my pride and my prejudice speak for me. I saw a quiet, small woman, and I assumed I knew her story. I assumed I was better." He tapped the glass of the frame gently. "This isn't just a badge. It's a reminder. It's a reminder that the most formidable people you will ever meet will not advertise their strength. They won't boast about their accomplishments. They will simply be competent. They will be professional. They will be quiet. Your job is to be smart enough to recognize them, to learn from them, and to get the hell out of their way when they go to work." He looked at the faces of the young soldiers, seeing the lesson land. He had become the keeper of the flame, the high priest of the cult of quiet competence. His own humiliation had become his greatest teaching tool. It was a strange, unexpected form of redemption. The legacy of Anya Sharma was not an abstract concept anymore. It was alive in this room, in the changed heart of a cynical sergeant major, and in the minds of the next generation of soldiers who were being taught to value substance over style. True legacy isn't what you leave behind in a frame on the wall. It's what continues forward in the actions and beliefs of others. It's the standard that endures long after the person who set it is gone. That quiet specialist had left behind more than just a story. She had left behind a better version of the very institution she had passed through, a silent testament to the enduring power of her example. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where a person's actions define their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.